Did you know there is only one kind of cobbler? I always thought it was a collective word, not any one specific type. Kind of like casserole or pasta. It didn't really matter what was in it or what shape it was, right? Wrong, apparently. There is only one true blue technical cobbler. It's the biscuit-topped cobbler, which is where cobblers get their name because the little dollops of biscuit look like a cobblestone street. I'm still going to call all the different types cobbler because I think it's evolved over time to refer to them all collectively. But if you really want to get nerdy about it, there is an argument to be made. But I'll take any excuse to make biscuits, so I wanted to show you the absolute classic way to make a cobbler, but with a twist too. See, there's another cobbler that is just as old and uses the same biscuit dough. The only difference is the technique you use to make it. It's an extra unique kind of cobbler, just as old and just as tasty. It was made originally in the New England area, and it is called a grunt, or sometimes a slump. If you're as unfamiliar before now as I was, a grunt is a biscuit cobbler, just like the original, but instead of being baked on top to golden, crunchy, buttery perfection, they are steamed inside of simmering fruit like a dumpling. The result is an especially tender biscuit, delicate, fluffy clouds soaked in sweet fruit juices. They are incredible. And if you're a fan of dumplings, this extra special cobbler will be your new favorite. I thought I would show you both at the same time so you can see just how different they come out despite using the same recipe, just a different cooking technique. So we'll start with the classic cobbler. I'm going to use my all-time favorite biscuit recipe, Best Ever Biscuits, out of the vintage Rock Creek Mobile Home Park Community Cookbook by Edna Burton. I'll link the original video I made previously if you want a more in-depth guide to how to make them, as well as another post I made previously about my best biscuit tips and techniques. But if you're comfortable with making biscuits already, we'll dive right in. To begin, we'll get our fruit filling ready. Use whatever fruit you can get ripe at the moment and add sugar and lemon juice. How much sugar you add will depend on the fruit you use. I'm using very sweet, extra ripe blueberries I am lucky enough to have in my area, so I'll use a half a cup. But if you're using a tart fruit, you can use up to a whole cup. Don't worry, it's a very forgiving recipe, so just use your judgment. Pour that into a baking dish and set it aside while we make the biscuits. Whisk flour, sugar, baking powder, and salt in a large mixing bowl, and then add butter. Make sure your butter is extra cold and cut it into chunks before you put it in. You can use a pastry cutter if you have one, but I prefer using my hands to cut in the butter. Undermixing is better than overmixing with biscuits, so stop as soon as you can, leaving plenty of large chunks of butter. Now set that aside for a moment to crack an egg into milk. I prefer buttermilk, but any milk will do fine. Give that a light whisk, and then add it to the flour butter mixture. Once again, mix as little as possible, just until it comes together. Don't worry if it's an extra shaggy dough. With biscuits, I found the uglier the dough, the tastier the biscuit. Now it's time to top our cobbler. If you have a fancy scoop, feel free to use it. I'm just going to use 2 basic spoons so you can see that you don't need any special tools or gadgets. Spoon a scoop of dough, about the size of a ping pong ball, and then use the second spoon to scrape it onto the fruit. I recommend starting in the middle and working your way out, just in case you don't have enough to cover the entire thing. But it's pretty easy to move things around if you need to. Make sure the biscuits are touching, but not on top of each other. Once all the dough is used up, you're done. I like to sprinkle a bit of sugar on top. Totally optional, but it gives it a nice texture when you're eating and a bit of extra color in the bake. And now it's time to go in the oven. You'll know it's done when the fruit filling is bubbling all around the edges and the biscuits are a nice golden brown on top. So this is a cobbler. Beautiful, sweet, bubbling fruit topped with buttery biscuits, a simple classic. So let's set that aside to cool as I show you how to make a grunt using the exact same recipe, but a very different cooking technique. So instead of using a baking dish, we're going to be cooking our grunt in a Dutch oven. You can use a deep skillet, just make sure it has a lid. Just like the first cobbler, we start with our fruit and add sugar and lemon juice. The only extra thing we'll add is a cup of water. Give it a good mix and then turn the heat onto low. Low heat is important for a few reasons. First is it's easy to burn, and second is that whenever you make dumplings, you'll always want the liquid at just a light simmer. Otherwise, the delicate dumplings might come apart. So let's set that aside while we make another batch of biscuits. Same as last time, start with your dry ingredients: flour, sugar, baking powder, and salt, and then cut in cold butter until just mixed. Occasionally, check on your fruit, giving it a light stir and monitoring how close it's getting to a simmer. Then whisk an egg into milk and add it to the flour and butter. Lightly mix until just blended into a shaggy dough. Your biscuit dough is now ready to steam. Check on the fruit to make sure it's simmering. Then use the same technique as last time to spoon a ping pong ball sized dough scoops into the fruit. Work as quickly as you can, and same as last time, place them next to each other, but not on top of each other. As soon as all the dough is in, place the lid back on and steam them for 15 minutes. It can be hard to test when dumplings are done, but the timer has never failed me yet, so just trust the instructions and they'll come out great. They are going to continue cooking as it cools, so don't panic if you think they're overdone. After 15 minutes, remove the lid and enjoy the beautiful sights and smells of steamy, fruity dumpling heaven. It's best to cool before serving. The dumplings will have a chance to firm up and the sauce will thicken nicely, so be patient if you can stand it. Apparently, the traditional way of serving is to scoop a dumpling out and flip it upside down, plating it bottom side up, then scooping a spoonful more berries and sauce on top. And of course, no cobbler is complete without a scoop of ice cream. So here you have it. This is one of America's oldest cobblers, a grunt. The dumpling is so tender and delicate, absolutely divine with a rich, sweet fruit. And the traditional baked biscuit cobbler, with its crunchy golden brown top and syrupy sweet fruit, is just as delicious. Isn't it amazing that the same ingredients can make two such different desserts? It's impossible to pick which is tastier. It just comes down to whether you prefer baked golden brown biscuits or tender steamed dumplings. The baked cobbler definitely has a prettier presentation, but the benefit of the grunt is you don't have to turn your oven on in the heat of summer. What do you think? Which would you prefer? I do hope you enjoyed learning about cobbler in two of its many forms. The recipe is in the description below, but I know it can be a little bit tough sometimes to copy from here. So give me a follow and comment recipe below and I will DM it to you. I have several other cobbler recipes to share, so be sure to follow me for more. You would be shocked how many forms this humble dessert has taken over the decades. As always, thank you so much, Edna, for sharing your absolutely perfect biscuit recipe in your community's cookbook. I am so grateful to be able to appreciate it. I do hope this inspires you to save more vintage spiral-bound community cookbooks and cook more old recipes.